It's Listen In with KNN, the sports sound of the district. Today, we welcome a former star from the NFL ranks. He spent his entire NFL career with the Denver Broncos from 1985 to 1995. He assisted the Broncos to 3 Super Bowl appearances in the 1980s and had an impressive performance in Super Bowl 21, recording 5 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown. His best season was in 1989, when he recorded 76 receptions for 1,095 yards and 7 TDs.
Elway up into the pocket, out of the pocket, down the middle. Pass caught by Vance Johnson, touchdown. What a heck of a catch and what a heck of a throw by Elway.
Elway's looking for 7. He's got a man. Touchdown, Vance Johnson.
Since his playing days, he has served as an advocate for addiction recovery for athletes after their playing careers, highlighted by the opening of a recovery center under his name in Las Vegas 2 years ago. We now welcome Vance Johnson to this live stream broadcast of Listen In with KNN, right now, with your host, Kelsey Nicole Nelson. It's Listen In with KNN, the sports sound of the district. We bring you the biggest guests, great analysis, and the hottest sports stories in the nation's capital and beyond. And we bring it to you live. Welcome to this live stream broadcast of Listen In with KNN. Here's your host, Kelsey Nicole Nelson.
All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday and welcome to another live stream edition of Listen In with KNN, presented right here on our home station, Fox Sports Radio, 96.9 FM and 1340 AM. With me, your host, Kelsey Nicole Nelson. You all know this is the official sports sound of the district and beyond. And now I know basketball mania is high right now as we are doing our play-in tournament, which I'm a fan of. We've had some great basketball, and shout out to LeBron last night. Might as well call him Clutch LeBron. But we're going to switch things over to the football part. We are starting to see our rookie class, right? Seeing them go to the facilities. We're preparing for OTAs and so much more. And today's guest goes beyond sports. He goes just beyond football. I'm really talking about life after football and what it's like to turn your life around. So I am so excited, without further ado, to welcome in none other than Vance Johnson. He's a published author, a former wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. So shout out to Broncos Nation. He was part of the famed 3 Amigos, right, of the John Elway-era Denver teams. And also, most recently, he opened a recovery treatment facility in Las Vegas. He's also a recovery ambassador, so a man who is changing lives. And we know that, especially at a time like now, we need things like that. So without further ado, please help me welcome Vance Johnson to the show. Vance, how are you today?
Kelsey, how are you doing, dear? I'm so excited to be on the show with you. I love everything you're doing, and so I'm so pleased to be here.
I'm excited to have you, Vance. I know we tried the first time, but much like in life, we never gave up and we did it again. And now here we are. And I'm just excited to talk with you. I know it's going to be a great conversation, Vance. And first off, you're in Florida, right? I'm a little jealous. We had some Florida-like weather here in the DC area, but there's no place like Florida and the palm trees and the sunshine. How are you enjoying it?
It's absolutely beautiful. In fact, I love DC. My sister lives up in DC right now. I drove all the way from Las Vegas to Florida just to come share my testimony and to hope with so many people in treatment. Yeah. And obviously being a former professional athlete, many athletes down here, the NFL reached out to me to do some golfing with some alumni this weekend. So it's been an amazing time being here in Florida where I got clean at years ago.
Look at that, life coming full circle. Where you got clean at, you're giving testimony to, right? And you're helping inspire others. And then you drove down there, Vance. Was that by choice? How long is that drive?
Well, it was not by choice. The company that I work for actually told me, Vance, we want you to take off and we want you to be there by Monday. I said, wait a second, I have to stop in Arizona first because they're talking about putting me on the Ring of Honor. Then I stopped at U of A, my old high school. And so it took me about 48 to 50 hours to get out here. I stopped and took a nap, but I didn't mind driving across the country.
Oh my gosh, Vance, well, you are a better person than me. Like, I'm too old now, Vance. I get tired, I get sleepy, but look, you're doing it for a good cause. You know, you talked about getting clean there. So to be back there, Vance, and be giving testimony, I mean, was that something that you thought about in your wildest dreams that you'd be doing, to be back in the place that you probably have some memories that were hard, right? Maybe even nightmares, but to be back there, giving testimony, inspiring others. What's that like for you?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because I promise you, when I first got clean, and we'll get into my testimony and my story, but when I first got clean, you know what I promised? I promised that even though I left the door of the recovery center, that I wouldn't leave the door itself. And that meant for the rest of my life, I was going to always stand by the door to hold my hand out to offer anybody who needed help. So it was just a way to come back to share the hope with people that were in the same programs that I was involved with. And I'm just so excited about it because our whole country is in desperate need right now for transparency when it comes to the struggles we have with mental illness and addiction.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you touched on that because Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And we're starting to have these conversations. And I think mental health now, Vance, is being talked about more than ever, unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And we were forced into a new reality. Most of us had to stay at home for longer than we've ever been at home, or stay in these smaller spaces and, stay around family members or significant others longer than before. And I think a lot of us have felt isolated. So for you, Vance, what has it been like during this COVID-19 period to just stay motivated and inspire others during this time?
Well, interesting enough, it was a way for, just like an athlete, when you're going to be good, it's because you have to do things that are behind the scenes so that when you finally show back up on the scene, people can see that actually you've been working hard behind the scenes. Well, during the shutdown, everybody was shut down. And unfortunately, the suicide rates have gone up all over the country. And so many people were broken in relationships. And it's just been really tough. And it was even tough for me because one of my the number 6 out of my 7 kids actually reached out to me and said that she was really disappointed and really hurt. She left me a voicemail actually, and she hasn't responded to that, but that was really hard for me. In fact, I've been sharing that audio and I've been putting it on my social media so people can let her know that your father wants to apologize to you because, I didn't really have a father, even though I had a father in my life growing up. And so I just really didn't know how to be a dad or a husband my whole life. So we'll get into that too.
Yeah. And I think what you're doing, Vance, is being vulnerable. And that's very hard for most people, especially in the world we live in. You're a former athlete. And I think most of us, especially when you're in the public eye, we're used to just posting our wins, Vance, and the good times, right? But it's a lot harder to show those difficult times and those hard times. Because again, it's you being vulnerable and opening yourselves up to others. And then even just you sharing that personal story about your relationship with your child. I think that's huge because I think you're not the only parent, Vance, that feels like that. And I think you're just showing it's never too late to make things right. I think that's a huge story. And you touched on your upbringing. So why don't we just start with that? You grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. Let's talk about what it was like growing up there for you, Vance, and kind of, how you define young Vance. How did you become kind of start to become who you are today?
Very good question. In fact, how I came about being born in New Jersey is my father was from New Jersey and he grew up in the streets of New Jersey. And unfortunately, his father was actually killed at a very young age on railroad tracks that they were building. And so my dad was raised by the streets. He was involved in gangs, ended up getting in a lot of trouble and faced prison time because there were even gang members that were dying. And so he was forced to make a choice to either go to prison and or join the service. So my father opted for the service, where he was stationed in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and ended up at 20 years old going to a James Brown concert where he met this 15-year-old girl who was sitting inside of a car. And she was only 15, like I said, and he proposed to a 15-year-old. So when I travel around the country, I talk to high school kids and I say, any 15-year-old sophomores in here? I say, don't talk to no 20-year-old boys. Anyway.
Stay away.
Absolutely. So they ended up getting married. He dodged the draft, didn't have to go to Vietnam, and moved back to New Jersey. And that's how I came about being born there in Jersey. Unfortunately, my father went back to his old ways, got in a lot of issues. And so my mother told him, if you want to be in me and these kids' lives, you got to come back to Arizona. So he came to Arizona. But there's a saying, and your listeners will know this: you can take the brother out of New Jersey, but you can't take Jersey out the brother. So my dad still hit the streets, and he was even though, man, this is really hard, but I got to be transparent. My father actually was really broken and was very abusive and was a very strong alcoholic and smoked weed and took different types of pills. So I grew up in a real traumatized atmosphere where I saw a dad just beat on a mom that she always had black eyes and bloody nose and everything. And so it was really hard growing up as a kid. So my life was about achieving an identity. And that's why I started leaning on sports and became, believe it or not, even at a young age, one of the best in the country.
Yeah, and it sounds like sports was like your safe place, right? Your safe haven where you kind of got to escape that unfortunate reality that you had to grow up in. And I think that's for so many, Vance. And I think so early on, did you see sports as kind of your way out to kind of hopefully change the reality that you grew up in so you could be different than your father?
And I'm glad you said that because I kind of hid in my sports. And believe it or not, to me, it was about achieving an identity. And so what only people saw was the edited version of Vance. They didn't see the behind the scenes where I was running away from home. I was very emotionally traumatized. I was having suicidal thoughts. But whenever I was on the football field or on the track field and people would be clapping for me and screaming Vance Johnson, I was like, oh, my God, this is how I want to feel.
You had that support.
And so all through my young childhood, it was about winning races. Do you know I actually ended up going and winning the gold medal for the United States of America in the Pan American Games when I was just a teenager. So it was about sports. And I used to make 4 or 5 touchdowns a game. And I even stayed home close to college at the University of Arizona, where I actually beat Carl Lewis in the 1981, actually NCAA championships, the #1 jumper in the world. I beat him as a freshman in college. So it was about achieving those goals. And believe it or not, guys, I had never touched drugs or alcohol all the way through my teenage years, all the way until I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah. And Vance, you made my job a lot easier because you just bragged on yourself. I was going to brag for you, but I love that you touched on those great achievements that you had. And it just showed you talked about just being in that atmosphere. And I think that's kind of why I love sports and even being on the broadcast side. When you're surrounded by the fans and that noise and people genuinely rooting for you, wanting the best for you. There's nothing like that experience, right? And again, it's like you had people saying your name, but in a positive way, wanting you to be the best version of you. And I'm so happy that you shared that. And yeah, I feel like that's a part of your story, Vance, that not enough people touch on. You're pretty fast, right? I know even at the NFL draft, you once ran a 4.28 40-yard dash. You guys heard me right. A 4.28 40-yard dash. When you hear that today, Vance, I don't know if anybody can compete with that, first of all.
Well, believe it or not, I actually ran even faster than that at the scouting combine. When I ran against Jerry Rice, I blew him away. And back then they did a stopwatch by hand. So I actually even ran faster than that. My lowest time was 4.18, 4.19, but the legal time was 4.28. But you know what? The reason why I was so fast, because I was a little small, fast guy, because I was afraid to get hit. So I really worked hard to be fast so I can get out of the way.
Well, that's smart, right? If you don't want nobody to hit you, just be faster than them, right? So they're behind you. I think that's the best way to be. And obviously super fast. And let's go back to your career at Arizona. So for the Wildcats, you were a starter, 81 to 84, multi-purpose back, amassing 2,885 yards with 104 receptions and 31 touchdowns, while also returning 62 kickoffs for 1,369 yards. Pretty wow. So when you look back at your career, Vance, at Arizona, what does that mean to you when you hear those numbers today?
Well, it's just so interesting, and this is such perfect timing because, believe it or not, just about 3 weeks ago when I started to drive out here, Arizona asked me to stop by, and it was the first time since I was a young kid that I was on the University of Arizona football field, and they were reminding me of all these different things that I was doing during my career and saying, Vance, we want to put you on a Ring of Honor. And so I started remembering, like, one of my first plays in my career, I actually ran 99 yards for a touchdown. And so it was just an amazing time being back there at the University of Arizona and remembering those days. And let me mention the name right now. You guys remember O.J. Simpson. Yes. Well, the reason why I'm bringing him up for a couple reasons, and I'll tell you the end of the story, but the beginning is I wanted to be like him because when he played at USC, they played against the University of Arizona. And when I was only 8 or 9 years old, I watched him play, and I wanted to be like O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
So it was about achieving,
then, right?
Exactly. So it was about achieving this identity. And, fortunately for me, I had a chance really all the way through college just to be one of the best athletes on the team, whether it was running track and jumping against Carl Lewis or playing football and just running for touchdowns. It was about making that success and that journey to be famous. But let me also add something in here because I have to be really transparent. Like I told you guys, I wasn't using drugs, alcohol, or anything during my young life. But the one thing I did do is I had a pornography problem because my father had these magazines called Hustler. He had these videos of people having sex. And so to me, I was always watching, looking at that. I ended up losing my virginity at 19 years old. And the first time I did, she got pregnant. Her dad wanted me to quit football, but I said I got goals and dreams. So he made me leave his daughter. I cheated on her. So I had 2 young girls pregnant by the time I was in college. And unfortunately, by the time I made it to the NFL, I had already abandoned those 2 kids. And I'll get into that part of my story too, because it gets worse.
Wow. And again, just you being so open and transparent about that. And it's not easy. Like you said, you were doing great things in sports, but you talk about just you as a human being. And look, life is about growing, right? Life is about growth. And of course, now you can look back. But again, it's what you're doing now, I think, to make things right. That's so important. And again, you touched on some of your records, but we didn't even touch on your high school records, Vance. Because also in high school at Chihuahua High School, you rushed for 1,386 yards as a senior with the Chargers. So you were like one of those people that the rest of us were always jealous of, because you were just always good, Vance. Like, we're like, man, I've tried everything and I just can't keep up with him.
Absolutely. In fact, A&E and a couple of different people are talking about doing a show about my life. And so they'll be able to highlight all those different things that I did during my adolescent years, because I really was one of the best athletes in the country. I even won the gold medal. I think I mentioned that for the Pan American Games for the United States of America. So it really was about doing amazing things out there in sports, because it was my identity. And when I was alone, I ran away from home and I hid. And so I had a real struggle as a child. So it was only about being a famous person. And we'll get to that part. And I'll tell you what happens when you get to the top of the ladder. There's only one place to go, but we'll get there.
And that's so true, right? Once you get to the top, unfortunately, it's only down from there.
Only down. And pro athletes, and I need to be really transparent for all you listeners, because when you see guys on the basketball court or the football field, all you're seeing is the edited version. But behind the scenes, many of us are dealing with a lot of trauma. And so we can get back into that. But the only place to go when you get to the top, and unfortunately, you're in your late 20s or early 30s, when your career is over with, is down. And what do you do when you get to the top as an athlete? You don't climb back down, you jump off. And unfortunately, that's the reason why you're hearing about a lot of athletes, especially pro football players, who are committing suicide right now.
Yeah, and that's something I think that's not talked about enough. And again, Vance, this is why I want to do on the show. And we keep it real, we keep it transparent on the show, because we're having a conversation. It's a conversation that needs to be had, and one that we cannot shy away from. I think especially, Vance, in the Black community, we have to talk about mental health, right? It's something that we can't shy away from. It's something that does need to be in the forefront. And again, I think now more than ever, we need to start. And I
appreciate your transparency, because that is so true. And even right now, even today, I actually got a text message and a phone call from a former pro football player. I can't mention his name, but he's out in California. He's really struggling. He's hurting. He's dealing with a lot of mental illness. And then just yesterday, I got some information about a brother that played 8 years in the NFL here in Florida, who's struggling and living in the streets right now on crack. You're not going to hear about these things in the press, but that's the promise that I made after I got clean, because I know where I hide at.
Right. And that's, again, just so huge. And that's why the majority of the interview, we're going to talk about that, because it's real, again. So we'll talk about your highs, but again, we're human beings and we all have lows. But again, it's learning to be vulnerable, and at least letting others hopefully learn from the mistakes that we've made, and hopefully inspiring others in that path. And I think something else that we need to touch on. So we're talking about your skills. We might as well go to the pro ranks. So you were drafted in the second round of the 1985 NFL draft, 31st overall, recruited by Mike Shanahan for the Denver Broncos. Take me back to that moment. You talked about wanting to be famous, Vance, when you finally get your name called and to know you're going to the next level, right? The top level of professional football. What was that like for you?
Well, we'll get some people excited. So has anybody heard of Randall Cunningham?
Of course, we've heard of Randall Cunningham.
Absolutely. So Randall Cunningham, I went to the East-West Shrine game, and I went to the scouting combine. Number one, at the scouting combine, I had never played wide receiver, and I needed to learn. So Randall Cunningham was the quarterback. He said, I want you to follow Jerry Rice around, run every route that he runs. I'm going to throw you the ball. And that's going to impress different people within the NFL to show them that you actually know how to run routes, and that you can go from the running back position to wide receiver. And then when the 40 meter comes up, I want you to blow his butt away. And so when the 40 meters came up, I ran against Jerry Rice and I blew his butt away. So here I am getting drafted second pick in the second round. But when I was watching myself get drafted, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and guess who calls me? Randall. And Randall's like, dude, did you see that, man? You just got drafted by the Denver Broncos. I said, Randall, if you look at the television, you're actually getting ready to get drafted right now. So you might want to get off the phone.
It's coming.
Yeah. So I ended up being drafted in the second round. I flew out to Denver, and you guys may want to know where this word came from. And I get to tell you, the newspaper said, 1 million people had this newspaper. It said, Broncos, add Vance. So that's what it was all about. So when I landed in Denver, Colorado, to me, I finally made it. God, thank you so much for this gift. I'm going to go be famous and rich, not knowing what was getting ready to happen on the fourth and final preseason game. And I'll share that with you here in a sec.
Yeah, and we're about to get into it. So like you said, your dream finally comes true. You know, you got Randall calling you. You're there, right? You said you wanted to be famous, right? You're finally there. We made it's the mama I made it moment, right? When you finally have done it. And then you get there to the Denver Broncos. I want to make sure people that know you, Vance, we know you played 10 seasons with the Denver Broncos, 1985 to 1995. And at this time, 5'11", 185 pounds. You talked about being a former running back, but just your career, becoming an all-pro receiver, going to 3 Super Bowls, and the yards that you amassed 5,695, catching 37 touchdowns. You got to team up with football fans. Y'all better know these names. Amigos, the fellow Amigos, Ricky and Mark Jackson. I think, Vance, your career, football-wise, many fans, many people loved you. Many people adored you. But I know on the backside of it, we'll talk about it. We might as well get into it. The preseason game that just kind of changed it all for you. Because you get to that next level, and it's different. It's not college anymore, right?
Nope, it's not college anymore, because all it takes is one drop and your career is over with. So the fourth and final preseason game, and by the way, you said 185 pounds. The Broncos lied. I was actually only 176 pounds at the most.
Look at them.
Yes.
They lie.
Well, not the Broncos. Somebody that worked at the
Somebody.
Broncos. Okay.
They added just a little bit of weight, a little bit of baby fat.
Well, they wanted to say I weighed a little bit more because they knew that, if you a guy that light, people are going to try to take him out. Well, we're playing against the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco. Right. And it's the last preseason game, and all I got to do is catch a punt at the end of the game. The ball's coming down at the 10-yard line. And I figured, you know what? I can catch a ball with my eyes closed. So at first I decide, you know what? Maybe I should close my eyes. And I'm like, nah, it's the last play. So when the ball starts to come down, I didn't catch it. It hit my hands and it rolls in the end zone. And San Francisco scores a touchdown and they win the ball game. My teammate's like, oh, dude, your career is over with. So we're flying back to Denver. I was really thinking about the trauma that I grew up in and around, how I was going to have to go back home. And unfortunately, when I got up the very next morning to go to the final cut that day, I actually stopped by the liquor store, and that's where I had my first drink. And I was like, whoa, my goodness.
You had that feeling, right?
And I didn't get cut either. Oh, my goodness. So that kind of introduced me to how I was going to be able to cope. And even though I struggled with my addiction during my career, I still was one of the best receivers, making touchdowns, and especially at the end of the game. But that's because I was sober by halftime.
Oh my gosh. And I just want to talk, because that's my question. How are you able to balance that, right? It's kind of like you're living 2 lives, right? You're living this pro life and you're having a great career on the football field, but then off the field, you're living this life where, you're trying to cope, right? You're trying to cope with just so many different things going on. So you're popping pills, you're drinking. I know you said at one point you were having, was it 60 up to 60 painkillers a day that you were eating at one time, Vance?
Yes. Yeah. I was taking all different types of opioids. I was taking Xanax. I was taking pain medications. I was taking mental illness because I was suffering with some trauma, and I was taking all different types of things. Plus I was smoking a lot of weed and I was drinking. Now they tested you when you first came to training camp, but we knew we had a few weeks to stay clean. And then we started using after that because they wouldn't test us the rest of the season. And so, but the thing about me is people only saw the edited version on the football field. They saw the person who I was wanting to be, but when I was off the field, I was broken. Guys, I was in so many relationships. I actually, after I'd already had 2 women pregnant, ended up getting another woman pregnant and started being really domestic, had a lot of domestic issues with her where I was violent with her, putting my hands on her. I got to be really honest with you guys. I was cheating on her. I was meeting other women, going to strip clubs. I was drinking. I was living a lie. I would get in car accidents, get into the hospital where sometimes they would find out, oh my God, that's Vance Johnson. The cops would come to raid the hospital. So they would hide me down by the morgue. I get pulled over sometimes going 155 miles an hour, but it was a Saturday. The game was on a Sunday. So they were like, man, you might make the winning touchdown. So I literally was getting away with, I would call it almost murder during my career. And again, sometime between the first and the second half, I would run all the alcohol and the drugs out of me. And so by the second half, I was able to go out there and just make winning touchdowns for John Elway. But then when I got off the field, guys, I would go just live a lie. And it was so dark and it was horrible. And it's because I grew up around a lot of trauma and issues, and plus the concussions I was dealing with. I got to be transparent and let all the young athletes and even the athletes that are playing in the NFL right now know that I know you're going through some things in your life, guys.
Yeah. And I think it's what needs to be talked about. A lot of times we put athletes on these pedestals, right? You guys aren't supposed to make mistakes. You're supposed to be perfect. Right. When you mess up, it's blasted to the world, especially now, Vance, right? With social media. I mean, nothing gets past anyone, right? Because it's for the world to see, and it's quickly coming to your phone, and you can go on and just see all negative comments and negative things being said. And people, now, especially because of Google, finding everything out about you and your family, right? Your loved ones. It's at the tip of a finger. And so, like you said, you're having this great football career, but then you're a different person off the field. I know it got really low for you, even at a point where you tried to kill yourself. And I want to talk about that, Vance, because again, it looks like everything's going perfect for you on the football field, right? You're living a dream. We know how hard it is to get to the National Football League, Vance. So many guys, that's their dream. And unfortunately, for so many, they won't even get to that level. So, when you're battling that, I mean, were you talking to any of your teammates, or was there anybody that you were able to kind of like reach out to when you were going through this deep time, Vance? Or was it truly you alone in kind of this deep sleeping place?
That's really, what's really interesting. So I was like the number one amigo. And so I couldn't let people know what was happening behind the scenes. And I wouldn't tell my teammates, I wouldn't tell anybody that worked with the organization because I didn't want to get cut. So I kept living this lie. And guys, after one of my Super Bowls, when I went home, I was so broken after the game. It wasn't because we lost, but it was because I was so traumatized as a kid that when I grew up, I didn't know who I was except for being on the field, that I literally was in my closet trying to kill myself. Here's one of my accidental times right here trying to kill myself.
Oh.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it on your arm. Wow.
Absolutely.
Long scar.
Yep. I literally was cutting my wrist because I wanted to die, but because they didn't have social media back then. And when I went to the hospital, it was all kept secret. And there were several different times where I literally was trying to kill myself during my career, where I didn't mind if I even OD'd. And so it was really tough. And guys, number one, me and the Amigos, the reason why we became the Amigos, because we weren't friends at first. But I was Mark and Jackson and I, who was one of my Amigos. We were roommates. I didn't like Ricky Nattil. And Ricky Nattil got drafted in the first round, so we didn't like each other. And all of a sudden, I came up with this idea. I went into Mark's room and said, "Mark, I got a great idea. I'm going to tell the press tomorrow that me, you, and Ricky are called the Three Amigos." And he looked at me like, "What are you talking about, man? What do you mean like each other?" I said, "I'm going to tell him. I'm going to blame it on John Elway." So I blamed it on John Elway, and it was on the front page. So then that forced us to have to get along. So we actually became really good friends, and that's the reason why we're to this day Amigos.
Yeah. And look, we will all remember the Three Amigos days.
Yes.
We're going back to about 2 years, starting in 1987. And like you said, John Elway and you all, the Three Amigos. And you guys were also known for being larger than life, right? Personalities. And I love that you shared the story. At first, you didn't like each other, but then y'all kind of came around. So talk about that bond that you all were able to develop and how you got so dang good in Denver.
Well, we were forced to have to spend time together. And so what that allowed us to do was get to know each other because we're in our 20s. And so instead of hating each other, we started to like each other because we were so open with each other. And we would go out and have dates together and go party and have a good time. We knew that we had one quarterback and one football, and that we wanted to trick the defense to not knowing which amigo was going to catch the ball. But then we'd go out and have fun and go to Taco Bell. We did commercials, we did videos, we flew out to New York, and I forgot the name of that really famous person that was on one of the shows out there. We went out there together, so we spent a lot of time together. But it was really important for us because we were always making sure that we were catching the ball and on our way to be successful. And eventually, though, Ricky Nattil, I think he ended up getting cut. And that's a whole nother story. That's a movie. I can tell you what happened, but we have to go somewhere with that one. And then Mark Jackson ended up going to play with the Giants. And so then here I am now left alone. And when those guys left, it got even worse for me during my career. Yeah,
and why don't we just touch on that, like you said, because you guys are finding success. Everyone loves you. You're performing on the football field. You got to crack 1,000-yard season in 1989. And like you said, then everything changes. And it's hard. But things are going good. And then all of a sudden, your reality has changed. Again, kind of like what's happening now. Talk about that process, Vance, for you and how you try to adapt to your new change now in Denver.
Well, there were a couple different, receivers that they were bringing from different teams and younger players that were coming in. I was trying to deal with my injuries. And when I was taking all these different medications to stay on the field, it was really hard for me. I got a real serious injury, and I decided to not stay with the Broncos. I went to San Diego in 1984. If you guys remember Junior Seau.
Yes.
So I knew some behind-the-scenes things with Junior Seau because I would hang out with him, and he was a really hard worker. And just like me, he only had an identity on the field. And that's the reason why, and I won't get into his personal stuff, that I know the real reasons why he ended up taking his own life. So besides the CTE, he also had some trauma in life that he was dealing with. But I decided to then go back to Denver. And eventually, guys, 10 years, 3 Super Bowls, I'm done with football. I don't even get cut. I just walk away. The Broncos called me. I said, yeah, I'll show up and sign the next contract. I didn't show up again. And unfortunately, like I talk about, when you climb to the top of a ladder, the only place to go is down. And I jumped off the ladder, and my only way to cope with life after my career was only to use more drugs, more alcohol, more relationships. Guys, during my career, I got to be honest, I had 3 women pregnant at the same time.
Wow.
I had my second wife pregnant. I had a girl I was cheating on with pregnant, and I had another man's wife pregnant during my career. I lived a horrible lie during my career, guys, and I'm really sorry, but I got to be transparent with you because I need people to know that transparency is transformation.
It is. I love that. Transparency is transformation. I'd say, Vince, don't apologize. Again, you're being vulnerable, and that's going to open it up for so many people. Because again, I think most people are scared to show our lowest points in life because most of us don't want to be judged, right, Vince? It's point blank, period, simple. Especially, again, you were in the public eye and media and everyone else. And I want to go back to what you just talked about, deciding to hang it all up. You had dreamed about this moment, Vance. You wanted to be famous. You're playing the game you love. So let's go back. Was it the 95 season, right? When you decided to just be done. I mean, just take me again through that process. Cause Broncos call you, you don't show up. You don't know what's next.
Right. Well, I was on my 3rd or 4th marriage. I don't even remember because I got married so many times that I don't even remember all of them. But I ended up actually going to my wife's house that day that she actually picked out for us. And I told her that I was done playing football. She said, well, then you can't come back here anymore. And she put my stuff out on the patio. And you guys are the first ones to hear about this. So I packed my things up and I moved up to northern Colorado. And I didn't show up to the Denver Broncos again. I wasn't going to play any more football. And leaning on my addiction and more relationships, I ended up getting married again and again and again. Guys, I got married a total of 7 times by the time I was just literally done with life. My oldest son moved over to spend some time with me. He went to college over on the western slope of Colorado with me. He forgave me for all the issues and things that I put him through and his siblings, which, by the way, guys, I had 7 kids and I had abandoned all of my children by the time I left the league because, again, I was so selfish. It was about me. And when my fame was gone, it was about trying to find me in a whole new area. And unfortunately, I found myself only using drugs, alcohol, and relationships. My oldest son comes over, spends time with me. And he reaches out to me and asks me, well, I don't answer the phone because he needs a ride to go see his mother. His grandfather just died of cancer. And my son ends up actually not getting a hold of me because he needed that help, but I wouldn't pick up the phone. I wouldn't respond. And guys, my son ended up actually getting killed that night on a motorcycle.
Wow. I'm so sorry, Vance. And again, I know it's probably still even hard for you to talk about now.
The reason why it's so hard, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's so hard because even though I'm new in my walk in my recovery, I go back and I still have the same feelings that I had when I lost my son. And I'm out here in Florida right now. I've already talked to probably several hundred people over the last couple of days, sharing my testimony and talking about my son. I usually show a photo of him, and it's really hard for me. Well, after my son died, guys, I even leaned even more on my addiction, which was more alcohol, which was more drugs, to the point where I was trying to commit suicide again. And I called my mother one night. She races over to pick me up. We race to the hospital. And by the time I barely make it out of the car, they call it ODing now. I ended up falling down and basically ODing right before I walked into the hospital door. They induced a coma. And so I was in a coma for 28 days. On day 24, they told my family members, because my body was shutting down, that everyone has to come say goodbye. So my sister flew out and my kids said, we hate him, let him die. And my sister took a deathbed picture of me that I'd love to send over to you. And literally, you could see me. They took my ventilators off. They propped me up, put oxygen in my nose and some wires to watch my body shut down. But only by the grace of God, on day 28, my eyes opened up.
By the grace of God. I think that's so well said, Vance. And again, I know it's so hard to talk about that moment, but I want to ask you, you've been clean, right? Sober since 2013, right? The fall of 2013. Mm-hmm. If you could just give your son a message today, what would it be about how you've changed your life around, Vance, and just what you've learned through life now, through your journey and your testimony?
Well, it's interesting you said that. And the number one thing is this, and the reason why I'm saying interesting you said that, because there was a young man, my son's age, that I met yesterday. Wow. And he was crying when I was talking about my son, and he was actually talking about how suicidal he was. But after I shared my testimony, I told him, do you know what I told my son at his gravesite? That for the rest of my life, I'm going to go out and try to offer hope to young men, because fathers are abandoning their kids all over the country. And after I got clean, especially when I got clean, the promise I made was, and I've already spoken to over 500,000 kids around the country, that, you know what, if your father didn't have a father, or if he went through trauma, and the reason why your dad's not in your life right now, it's not necessarily his fault. It's because he didn't know how to be a father. He didn't know how to be a husband. And so I encourage these young boys that I'm sorry, because I was that dad. And I just want to educate them so they can know that their identity actually doesn't have to be in them being successful and famous, but I'm a man of faith, And so I tell them, I hope you're a believer, because my Savior Jesus Christ is the only reason why I'm alive today. And so I have to be honest with you. That's my testimony. And that's what I like to go out and share to everybody, because the life that we live in right now, sister, is just a dressing room for eternity. I had spiritual experiences when I was in my coma, where I saw 2 ex-wives come say their goodbyes and 2 pastors pray over me. But everyone couldn't understand how I saw people that when I was in a coma for 28 days.
Right.
I literally had the spirit man inside of me see these people come and visit me.
Wow. I mean, just so much that you touched on. But again, I think it's just powerful testimony that you're talking about, and really just never giving up. You were in a coma and you had these experiences, and you talk about someone reminding you of your son. That's not by chance. That is by God.
But we haven't had a conversation. So I don't even know how this is coming out of you unless it's the Spirit of God talking through you right now.
Right. But this is, for everyone to watching this, again, this is just us talking. This is us having a conversation. And I think it's huge. I want to take a question from the fans, from my mom, Vance. We support each other for the show. Great. Having money and fame, would you trade it in to be a regular Joe if you could do it all over again? Would you trade in all the money and all the fame, knowing you know now, to just be an average, regular person?
I'll be honest with you. I thought about that, but I have to say no. And I'll tell you the reason why. Yeah. And I tell everybody this when I share my testimony, when people are dealing and struggling, that you know what you're going through right now is actually a gift. And they look at me like, how's it a gift? I say, what will be your testimony in your life if you didn't go through what you went through? Then you need to use that gift so that you can offer hope to somebody else that's struggling. Do you know I would not be on this playing field that I'm on in helping people in recovery unless I ended up on the playing field that I ended up having to walk away from? But now I'm on the playing field for life. And so I'm glad I had that platform so I can break the transparency, and so that so many people who look at athletes like, you know what, they got it made. No, we don't have it made. So I'm going to break that stigma.
And you talk about breaking the stigma. I want to go back to that because, Father's Day is around the corner. And I'm just going to be transparent and be honest with you. One of the things I absolutely hate is when everyone starts to just badger Father's Day, like all fathers are bad. I think it's not true. But I understand that people have come from just difficult backgrounds where maybe their father was not in their life. I'm the complete opposite. I had a girl dad dance. That's how I got into sports. I was a daddy's girl, right? And I love just being around my dad and loving the game. But you talk about trying to break that cycle of trauma. And unfortunately in schools, we're not doing a lot of stuff for mental health, right? And even now when kids are online and getting away from that. So just from your experience, and for a lot of guys, I think even in the National Football League and many sports, this story is not foreign to them, and maybe not having a relationship with your father, but being a man. We talk about being a man in sports and being a man on the football field, but being a man in life, Vance, what would your advice be to those guys who didn't have father figures in their life, or good male role models around to just hopefully be the best version of themselves for their kids, right? Or anybody else in their life so that they can just be the best version of them?
Well, you are just absolutely amazing. I'm telling you, you're just spirit-led right now, because the questions you're asking are so vital and so important these days, especially now. And with 2020 happening and the domestic issues going even higher, so many people committing suicide. I actually spoke up in northern Colorado, where that's the third highest place right now where people are taking their own lives. Yeah. I need to tell you, fathers, something. Dads, don't blame your dads, and dads, don't blame your dads for the things that you're going through. You need to be the change, and you need to be the transparent one to show the hope by being the father and the husband. I'm asking fathers right now and husbands right now, have you ever, after getting on your knees to propose to your wife, have you been on your knees since then? Then you need to get back on your knees and look up at her again, and you need to let those kids see you go on your knees and look up at your wife and say, honey, I love you and I'm sorry. Also, fathers, you need to tell your kids, I repent for the things that I've done. I need to show you in the way that you should go, and I'm so sorry. But my problem is I had a father who didn't have a father. So maybe that's a part of what I'm having to deal with. So everyone that's listening right now, it's not necessarily your father's fault. Maybe it's because of what he grew up in and around that caused him to deal with a lot of trauma in his own life. And you need to be the change that needs to happen here in America. So fathers, wake up.
Wake up now. You guys heard it right here from Vance Johnson and Kelsey Nicole Nelson. And I think it's such a powerful message. Look, it's never too late to make something right. I hope that resonates with everyone. Again, we've all had a past, we all have a background, but it's about making it right for the future generations that are coming.
I got to cut you off. Do you know that? So 6 out of the 7 of my kids over my walk and my recovery have followed me on social media and have talked to other people. They've accepted my apologies. For the first time in my youngest daughter's life, my oldest daughter rather, when she was a baby, the one I abandoned, just like 3 weeks ago, I spent time with her and my grandkids for the first time in their life.
Wow.
And it was just such an amazing
And
opportunity.
grandkids, congratulations,
yes, with
man.
my grandkids. It was just amazing. And there's only one daughter actually that I have that is the only one that hasn't forgiven me. But in 2020, and I hadn't talked to her since she was 8 years old. She's 28 years old now. She sent a message to me on Messenger. And I actually ended up having to share it on my social media because she wouldn't respond to me. And I'm offering an apology. And it went viral because I want people to tell her that it's all Dad's fault. And I'm so sorry that I abandoned her when she was a kid. In fact, if you got a minute, I can let you even listen to it. That's how transparent I am.
Let's do it, man. Again, this is my show. I get to do what I want to do, Vance. And again, I think this transparency is huge. And I think something I want to talk to you about is it's hard sometimes to ask for forgiveness, right? It's hard for a lot of us sometimes, Vance, to admit we're wrong. So thank you for sharing that.
You see her name? I don't know if you can see her name up there.
Yeah, I think we can see it. You guys see it? Yep, we can see it.
Her name is Paris Ike.
Yeah.
These are actually all the different times where I was trying to reach out to her and she wouldn't respond to me. She wouldn't respond to me all those different times where I was trying to get a hold of her.
Wow. And you would say this over the course of a couple years, Vance, or a couple months?
No. She reached out to me. She reached out to me last September 12th. She reached out to me here and left a voice message on Messenger, but she didn't respond to my messages afterwards. But I'm gonna let you guys hear this. It's gonna be really hard for some of you, but I need you to hear so I can be transparent. If you guys get a chance to look up Paris Ike, tell her that her father is sorry. But here it is right here.
Why would you choose to leave me the way that you did? I think about it all the time, and it makes me feel like I have no worth, and I've avoided you my entire fucking life because you made the decision to leave me when I needed you. I literally can never trust a man. I'm 28 years old. I'm 28 years old and I still can't trust a man with my heart because the man that was supposed to show me what love looks like left me on the side of the fucking road like I'm a piece of trash. And you don't even deserve this message, but year after year after year, I don't know how to handle it.
Vance, I have to say, I know it's so hard to replay that and to hear it again, but you sharing that, and I'll tell you, it resonates with me because I'm 28 years old and I haven't imagined not knowing my father, but the fact that you reached out to her and she got her emotions out and expressed to you how much, and it's unfortunate, but I also can hear the love. She wants to connect with you, but it's hard. It's hard.
You know what? Thank you so much. And I got to tell you why, because I heard love in her voice.
Yeah.
And so I told her, thank you so much for reaching out to me, honey. And I thank you so much for the way you told me. But I hadn't talked to her for so many years that I needed to hear from someone that is her age, because you heard what's inside of her. And so you just validated what I was hoping and praying that was inside of her.
It's love, Vance. And it's hard. It's so hard for her. And again, I don't want to make you emotional, but at the same time, we're being vulnerable, we're being open. And a lot of times you have those emotions and you get that anger. It's because she wanted you there. She wanted to share her moments with you, right? Prom and homecoming, first kiss, even with her dad, right? But those are moments that she feels she was neglected from. But the biggest step she did, Vance, was reach out. I know you haven't heard back from her, but reaching out is a big step.
Yes, absolutely. And I've reached out, probably for several months now, but it doesn't make a difference because I'm never going to give up hope. And that's the reason why I want this thing to go viral so people can reach out to my daughter and say, your father takes all the blame. It's not your mother's fault. It's your dad's fault. And he's sorry and he loves you. And he wants to thank you for reaching out and leaving the message that you did. And I'm sorry.
And Vance, if you don't mind, if I can pry a little bit, have you had a chance to talk to her mother and reach out to her, maybe to try to reach Paris?
No, actually, her mother ended up kind of disappearing on her too. Oh. And so I had no contact with her mom. And in fact, her mom blocked me many, many years ago. And so I haven't been able to even reach out to her at all either. And I've tried to on social media, but it's easy to block people on social media, but it's not easy to block the world. So that's the reason why I'm so transparent and open and letting everybody hear and know about this. And by the way, you shouldn't see and know the number of ball players who have done this to their children. It's all over the country. And so that's the reason why, again, transparency is transformation.
Yeah. And I think, we hear it all the time when we see athletes have multiple kids by multiple women. And I think, again, outside looking in, it's easy to judge, right? Because people don't know your story. They don't know the trauma. Again, we just know the glitz and glamour of it. But again, I want to stay on this because I think it's so important. If Paris is listening to the show right now, if someone has somehow touched her and told her to listen in, what would you say to her at this very moment right now, Vance?
I would tell my daughter, I love you. I miss you. You actually were the only child that I even planned on having. I even came up with a name before you even born. Before I even knew you were a girl, I knew that Paris Johnson was going to be born. I know she took an adopted name, and that's how she came up with the name Ike, because she was adopted. And I believe he abandoned them too. But I just want my daughter to know that I'm so sorry and I love you. And I can't wait to get on my knees in front of you and apologize because it was all my fault.
It's huge. That's a huge step, Vance. And again, I hope that message gets to her. No, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. But I think what comes from it, and many people, if they could today have their parents still here, they would pray for them back. Unfortunately, people who lost their parents, but just hopefully mending that relationship will be huge. So Paris, if you're out there, again, I'm outside looking in, but I do hope you at least give your father a chance to at least have a conversation. That's all. At least have a conversation, be able to talk with him so you all can just have a needed conversation, because we want to break the cycle, right, of broken families. And again, you're trying to make it right, Vance. So thank you. And I have to do a mental check because, again, I know this is an interview, Vance, but are you okay?
Actually, I am okay because, again, I'm a man of faith. And all through my scriptures that I read in my Bible, it says that we have to endure the trials and tribulations that we go through. And it's just like you do when you're an athlete and you're young. You got to work hard and you got to do things behind the scenes to build yourself up so that you can be successful. Well, now I'm going to be successful in my walk and worshiping and loving my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and just knowing that the trials and tribulations are the things we're supposed to endure in life, not take your life. And I need to tell you guys another thing. There's a difference between killing yourself and dying to yourself. When you die to yourself, you deny yourself. But when you kill yourself, you take yourself.
That's powerful. Yeah. When you kill yourself, you take yourself. But, sometimes you do feel like you've died inside. And I think it's hard. Again, I think it's hard, but you've talked about it. You've talked about your struggles. I think it's also just showing that athletes are humans. I try to preach that all the time, Vance, but they go through everything that we're currently going through, right? The world, I think a lot of us, again, are just going through so many different times. But again, you can't just erase those traumas that happened in life, right? It's speaking out, talking to them. And to that point, I'm curious, Vance, you talk about just therapy. Because again, I think this is something that we don't talk about enough either. It's like now we're finally having athletes come out and kind of normalize therapy. Not enough of them, Vance, but just reaching out. And what's that process like? Because again, it's one thing to know you have a problem, but it's another thing to finally address that problem. So when you have to go to a rehab center, when you have to go to a therapist, how do you find the courage and the strength to finally do that, Vance? How did you find the strength to finally put yourself in?
Well, it's really interesting. You just have the most amazing questions, and they're just so spirit-led, young lady. So I just have to say thank you so much. I literally spoke to over several hundred people the last couple of days, and 80 yesterday and probably a few hundred of them today. And it was about breaking the stigma to talk about treatment and where people need to be so that they can know that they need the help. Well, you have to be broken, because unless you're broken, you're going to be living a lie. So people broken, people dealing with the mental health problems that we all suffer with, if you're transparent about this, you'll be able to get help. And athletes hide. And that's the reason why I know I'm reaching out to a number of ball players, because when we're famous, we don't end up going to treatment. We're the same place that the fans are, because then they'll be like, wait a second, you were one of my favorite ball players. What are you doing here?
Right.
Well,
right.
That's the reason why it's about breaking the stigma, because we all suffer with some type of mental health and or struggles. And so we need to be open to our counselors so that people can see that your transparency being your transformation is going to be hope for somebody else to be transferred to into a hope of recovery. And mental illness is real. And that's why I'm here to break the stigma at churches all over the country, because just because you go to church doesn't mean that you're going to be free from the bondage. But literally, you need to know that you have to get help and know that there's a walk that you need to walk it out so that you can actually endure the trials and tribulations that you're going through in life, because we all are.
We all are, the trials and tribulations. And again, just because I talk about that all the time, Vance, I put this tweet out maybe about last year, and I put, I'm a person that if you see any of my social media, I'm usually smiling. And, I was vulnerable, and I had to say, I sometimes hide behind the smile, because when you smile, Vance, what happens? Nobody asks you what's wrong. Nobody asks you if you're okay. And you can kind of just hide all of your different emotions. And it's easy to do, right? And then everything, Kelsey's always fine. She's always happy. She's always smiling. And it's not the case. And again, it's being vulnerable. And I can admit that's something that I do have a hard time doing. I like to make it like everything's perfect, because then people don't keep poking, right? They don't keep poking the bear. And I think something that I've been so inspired by you is you're talking about your faith. And I think faith has played a tremendous part in you. So I want to kind of stay on that. I want to ask you, when did you find God? When did you rely on faith to kind of turn your life around and to be a leading force in your life to make positive change?
I sure appreciate that. And number one, when I was just a little kid, I actually believed in God. In fact, I was in my room one day and it was dark inside the room. And I literally, guys, looked up into the ceiling and the ceiling lit up. And I said, God, I heard him say to me, like, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be a pro football player. Yeah. And I didn't realize that he was going to give me the dream that I wanted, knowing that I was going to end up where I was going to end up at. And that literally was dying to that dream that I wanted. But then I became a real believer when I started to just really cry out to God when I was driving through a canyon during one time that I got really, really high to the point where I was going to die again in my addiction. And my 7th ex-wife and a former NFL ball player by the name of Randy Grimes reached out to me and said that they would be willing to help me get into treatment. And I was $1 million in debt. So literally A&E, the show A&E Intervention, I used to watch that show wishing that somebody would do an intervention on me. And God heard that prayer too. So that was the beginning of it. Then I went to treatment and I started to read the Bible because now I had a clear mind from the drugs and the alcohol. And I started reading about being in bondage to all these different things and how we're supposed to deny our flesh. And denying our flesh means that you say no to drugs. You say no to alcohol. Yeah. We're not supposed to lean on our own understanding, the Bible says. That means that we think that we know what's right, but it's wrong. In the book of Proverbs, it says there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death. Well, guess what? What did I say my whole career? I thought I was doing the right thing. Where did it lead me? Almost to death. So these things are real in the scriptures. Then I read in Hebrews 5:7 where Jesus said when he was here in the flesh, and we know he had to die for our sins, but the Jewish people at one time tried to kill him. And it says that he cried out to the one that can save him, and he was heard because of his reverence. So I asked people, are you being reverent when you cry out to God? And then this is the part that got me. He learned obedience through what he suffered. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So now I ask people, are you learning obedience to what you're suffering through? Mm-hmm. That's obedience. So you're not supposed to give yourself over to your addiction or to these pornography things that you want to be a part of, or more relationships, or lying and stealing and cheating. You're supposed to learn through your suffering, obedience. And that's exactly where I'm at. And that's why I only lean on faith. I could do a sermon with you one day. I sure hope to, because I'm all about the scriptures. I'm all about the Bible. And that's 24/7. It's the only way I stay clean. You know what? I literally am in a place right now where I'm 6 floors up in a hotel. And I'm looking over top of the balcony, and I can see the river and the lake here. Yeah. And I used to have these suicidal thoughts about jumping over and killing myself. And when I got up here today, I was like, I haven't been up this high looking over top of a balcony for a long time. But I don't hear the voices anymore. And you know why? Because Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, and a stranger they won't follow. And that means this. Even though you're hurting and you want to die, that's not actually your voice. That's just your feelings. And the enemy is disguising his voice as yours, telling you should kill yourself. Again, I don't want to start preaching, but this is all true.
Please do. And again, I think these are messages, not even just for me and you, Vance, but for so many out there. There's so many going through difficult times right now. And again, talking about life coming full circle, you now are being a voice, I would say, for the voiceless, to now have a recovery center, Vance, in your name, the Vance Johnson Recovery Center in Las Vegas, of all places. And right, we all love Vegas, but we also know in Vegas, there's a side that's not talked about. It's not shown on the commercials. And it is the part that, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And sometimes people do stay in Vegas because there's things going on, Vance. So to now have a recovery center with your name, your recovery ambassador, what's that like for you?
Well, a couple things. Number one, the show A&E hired me last year to do the show Intervention. And I did an intervention on a young lady who was selling her body for sex on the strip. And then when things shut down, she was selling her body virtually so she can get drugs. I did an intervention on her. Do you know Vegas was my biggest problem? I got married out there 4 times during my career. I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. In fact, I was held hostage by a casino during my career, and the Broncos had to pay them off before they allowed me to leave town. So literally, I started to realize when we opened up the Vance Johnson Recovery Center that Vegas wasn't the problem. It was Vance. Because when we brought Vance to Vegas, there was an issue. But now if you bring Vegas to me, there won't be a problem. However, it is Sin City, but people out there are struggling too. And that's the reason why opening the Vance Johnson Recovery Center, I'm glad when 2020 came, we had to shut things down for a while. And I was really tempted and tested, but I did not go to any strip clubs. I didn't go gamble. I didn't go drink. I didn't relapse. And so I give God all praise. And now it's about saving lives and souls again. And so that's the reason why we have the Vance Johnson Recovery Center. And I'm looking at doing more of these around the country.
I love it. Oh, you said more around the country. Do we get to see anywhere you were thinking of?
So right before I got on the phone with you, I actually was reached out to by a church in northern Colorado, and they want to open up a treatment program that's a Christian-centered program to help people that are in the church. I got reached out to by a company, another church in Montana, and then New Jersey, up in the state of New Jersey. The governor is going to be reaching out to me, and I'm talking to people there too. It's just about opening up all over the place because I want to save as many souls. And you know what the Bible says? Yeah. Your fruit will bear witness. And that's the reason why I want to plant seed and water and let God bring the increase.
I love this. See, every story I like to say has a happy ending, and we're talking about your happy ending, Vance. And of course, your story is still being written, and this is why we're excited to continue to follow it. And something else I think that you've also talked about is you're happily married now, right, Vance?
Wow. You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. And I can't share all the story, but I ended up actually separating with my wife a couple of years ago. To me, I'm still married. I had to leave her because there was some trauma that happened. I actually had to call the cops on her because of some things that she had done to me, but I didn't let them arrest her. But I promised myself I would never get married again. And this is so interesting that you said this because her and I we're in contact again. And I'm hoping somehow that we're going to be able to reunite. In fact, I'm on my phone doing the video. Otherwise, I'll read the text messages that we're texting back and forth. And then today is my adopted son's birthday. Which when I get off with you, I'm gonna give him. She was the one that reminded me. And so I'm going to be calling him when I get off this.
I love that. I feel selfish now. I feel like I'm taking part of his birthday, man. But, I think something that you just said is huge because I think also in society, we're taught that to be happy, you have to have someone else, right? A significant other. But it sounds like you, Vance, you're learning, and it sounds like you've learned to love yourself and take care of yourself. I think that's huge because, again, in society, Vance, we're told what? You need to be with somebody, you need to get married, and you need to have kids. And not that there's anything wrong with that, Vance. But I think before you can do that, you do have to know yourself. Right. And you have to love yourself and love who you are, your flaws and your good things. Right. It's loving both of those and knowing yourself. So what would you say that you've learned most about yourself, Vance, in all the years that you've had on earth? Right. What would you say? What's the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself?
Well, the biggest thing I learned about myself is this. Many people always say, God has somebody special for you. God has somebody special for you. That's a lie. God has you as somebody special for somebody.
Yes.
He don't have people waiting for you. He's got you so that you can be that person for them. And I didn't know that because, like I said, I got married over and over and over again because to me it was about having God give me another one, another one, another one. What about you, Vance? You're the problem. So now I know that I have to be the one that's going to be there for somebody. And so I'm willing to risk my life for the woman that I love. And that's exactly how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. I'm never getting married again. I'm never going to be with another woman again. And I'm hoping and praying, just like it started this morning with the text messages and the phone calls, that my wife and I are going to reunite again. That's where I'm at. That's how transparent I am, guys.
That is so beautiful, Vance. I mean, I need the tissues, Vance. I need tissues. I brought tissues because I knew you were going to do this to me. But I think it's so powerful, again, your testimony and what you're sharing. Again, just talking about mending relationships. Today I'm curious, you talked about being able to mend those relationships with your children. Can you give us any insight, the rest of this year, or any fun trips planned or anything that you're doing to kind of hopefully help just be with them more, Vance, and be in their lives and just continue to be a great grandfather, maybe more to come, and just continue to support them?
Well, the best part about that is my kids actually, like I said, they've all reached out except for the one that reached out with pain that she's suffering through. But all of my kids, 2 of my sons, I ended up getting into treatment. They were struggling with addictions. We become really close. And my other sons are actually reaching out to me and we become really close too. And I even got a text message from one of the sons that I told you that I was cheating and it was another man's wife. He actually told me just recently, and again, if I wasn't on this phone, I'd prove it to you by showing you the text. He said he wants to see me when I come back to Denver. So this is just amazing. So I want to tell you, fathers, go be with your kids and tell them how much you love them and get on your knees again like you did when you proposed to your wife and say, I love you, honey. And I just want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what.
I love that, Vance. And again, if you've been inspired by this interview by Vance Johnson, which if you haven't, then you must be a robot because he's saying so many just gems and tidbits. You also have a book, Vance, that I want to talk about, Uncovered, Why Becoming Less Became Everything. And I want people to know that they can go to this book because I wish I could interview you for we could talk for 4 days straight, Vance, and just continue these stories. But talk about this book and why it was so important to put pen to paper to share this story. And hopefully anybody that buys this book, Vance, what they'll get from it by purchasing a copy.
Right. Well, the reason why I came up with the name Uncovered is because when you're playing football and you're a wide receiver, you want to be what when you're open? Uncovered.
Yeah.
So that's where you're open, and that means you're transparent.
Yeah.
So being uncovered means that I was taking off all the darkness so I could show everybody the darkness that I was living in.
Yeah.
And becoming less became everything. And that means that I lowered myself because, again, it was about me and I was better than everybody else. And that's how I ended up breaking so many people's hearts. But when I became less, it became everything to me. And so now I put everybody else above me. That's the reason why even today I talked to a lady up in New Jersey who reached out to me, who was struggling, who was really wanting to commit suicide. And I literally, again, about an hour ago, ended up actually getting an email and text message that she actually flying down to Florida where I'm going to see her on the 1st of the year. And so this is what it's all about, because you know why? I became less. I became less is about everybody else now. And so I'm going to stay uncovered.
I love that, Vance. Before I let you go, you talk about being there for everybody else. And I know people like that who do everything for everybody else, but also trying to take care of themselves. Has there ever been a moment, Vance, where you ever just felt it was too much for you, too much to handle what you were going through? And even today, I'd say, but also trying to help everyone else, Vance, or how are you able to kind of balance that, right? Because you have everything that you're going through, but then you're also trying to help other people. Is there ever a moment where it comes, like, just becomes too much of a burden? And if so, how are you able to kind of just and still get through?
Well, I will tell you this, every day is too much of a burden. And I'm sure everybody listening understands that. Every day it's too much of a burden, but that's also biblical. We're supposed to carry each other's burdens. So I have different pastors that I'm friends with who help me, who reach out to me. And did I tell you guys about the Randall Cunningham story?
You did.
Guess who my pastor is in Las Vegas? Randall Cunningham is my pastor in Las Vegas now. And so he just reached out to me the other night and said, man, I've been thinking about you. You've been on my heart, man. Where you at? I said, I'm out in Florida. And so he carries my burdens. And that's what I'm trying to tell you guys. It's about being transparent and open. I hurt and suffer every single day, but then I am only strong in my walk with my Savior Christ Jesus. It's about his story, not mine. And that's the reason why I tell everybody the flesh you live in right now on this earth is just a dressing room for eternity. So what are you going to do while you're in it?
I love that. Just a dressing room for eternity. You know, one of my high school yearbook quote was, what we do in life echoes in eternity. So we're here on that, and I think it's huge. See, sometimes things are meant to happen in advance. Before I let you go, for the sports fans, I do want to end this with a fun one. Take me back to the drive to January 4th, 1992 at Mile High Stadium. You know what you did, Vance, but let's relive that moment for all of the listeners and the viewers.
Wow, it's really going to depend, because I was one of the ones that John Elway always threw the ball, whether it was a fourth down or whatever. And I always got a chance to just make sure that I got as far down the field as possible so that our field goal kickers can make field goals. Now, are you talking about when the ball was fumbled on the 1 yard line and the other team won, or which one are you talking about?
No, when you won, man. Come on. That's happy moments. Ready on a happy note.
Absolutely. I used to just love when John, I love coming to the end of the game because John Elway, throughout the game, he would call it 247 XYZ on one, ready, break. At the end of the game, he would go like this, 247 XYZ on one. Vance, you better catch this ball. Ready, break. And so John Elway, he told you, if you better catch it, you better catch it, because otherwise you were going to get cut the next year. And so I always caught that pass because John said, you better catch it. Otherwise you won't be a Bronco next year. Ready, break.
And lo and behold, Vance Johnson caught a lot of footballs from our guy, John Elway.
That's why my finger is like this now.
Oh, John, look, sacrifice to make sure he got that ball and helping to get wins. Just wow. Vance Johnson, it's been such a pleasure to have you here on Listening with KNN. Before I let you go, just any last notes or anything that you want to leave with the listeners today?
I just want to say thank you. I love being transparent with all of you, and I hope you guys are too. And keep being fans and keep cheering on those guys, but know that they're probably dealing with some things. And so if there's anything that you can do for them, because they've done everything to make sure that you're excited about the game, pray for them. Pray for them.
Pray for them. I think it's perfect timing. The Broncos just got their brand new draft class. We'll be praying for all of them, as well as all the guys on the roster. But again, just being there for support. And I think everyone could use a prayer, because there's always something that someone's going through that you don't always know, right?
That's right. In fact, I'm the uniform inspector now. The NFL reached out to me last year, so I'm the uniform inspector at the Raiders Stadium.
Look at that.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. And I had a chance to meet Tom Brady. I knew he was going to the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes. I knew he was going, but I wasn't allowed to share that on social media because I'm a former ball player. But welcome back to the NFL.
Welcome back to the NFL. Again, life coming full circle. Vance Johnson, thanks again so much for your time. Stay safe, enjoy Florida, and just continue to impact and change lives, Vance.
God bless you, young lady. You too. You are amazing. I love your show.
Thank you, Vance. I appreciate it so much. Please keep in contact. That survey, I'm not going to forget, Vance. We'll keep it up. And again, check out his book. You guys will definitely want to read it. I'll put the link in the comments. Vance Johnson, thanks again so much for letting me steal an hour of your day.
Thank you.
Don't hold it against me, but it was a powerful hour, and I'm so glad we had you.
All righty.
Thanks so much.
See you.
Bye, Vance. Now, happy birthday to the little one. Go enjoy. Bye, Vance. All right, everyone. Thanks again so much for tuning in to another live stream edition of Listen In With KNN. Just wow, Vance Johnson, a powerful, powerful, powerful testimony. I think I can just do the mic drop. Not much more needs to be said. We'll continue with these interviews. You guys know every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time and every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And to those on the East Coast, hey, we need the Wizards, hopefully, to get that win. We want them to be in this play-in game and play well in this play-in game. So I know you all will be tuning into that tonight at 8 p.m. As always, thanks so much for joining me. And a special, special, special thanks to my team. I cannot do it without them. They are behind the scenes. But everything that goes on this show is not just me. It's a collaboration of all of them. And also just taking from Vance's message, please just take care of yourselves. Mental Health Awareness Month. Take care of yourself. Love yourself and always be true to yourself. All right. I'll see y'all next week. Have a great one. Bye, guys.
Follow Kelsey on social media at The Real K Nelson. Catch episodes of Listen In with KNN on YouTube, on air at AM 1340 and 96.9 FM Fox Sports Radio, on Facebook and Twitter, and online at KelseyNicoleNelson.com. Thank you for watching this live stream broadcast of Listen In with KNN.
Listen In with KNN on Fox Sports Radio now offers official Kelsey Nicole Nelson apparel in a variety of styles for men and women. Fashionable shirts, leggings, hats, jackets, and more. Order now and get 15% off and free shipping. Just enter promo code KNN. Get your Listen In with KNN wearables today. And check out Listen In with KNN on Fox Sports Radio with Kelsey Nicole Nelson.